Yeah, it can be quite difficult, and especially in those circumstances as well. But as you can see here, I think Osha does have that odd rogue, and I think with Westwith, it's going to be quite similar.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be interesting here because so Osha's actually queued his Paladin first, I believe, and it's Westwith on the rogue. Westwith choosing to include Edwin Van Cleef, not many lists do, but obviously here it gives them the option to potentially just coin out a 4-4 on turn 2. But with the Hench Clan Thug, it kind of dissuades you from that, and you can kind of... It's interesting to see how players choose to use the Edwin Van Cleef, because you can play it early for just a medium-sized minion that's pretty overstatted for the turn, or you can save it for, you know, later turns where it's kind of like, well, how does a class like Paladin deal with an 8-8? How does it deal with a 10-10?
It makes you wonder as well, because with a minion like that on the board, it's going to be extremely hard for Osha to even take that out. But of course, Westwith's going to have, you know, a pretty good time with that Thug turn 3. And with that Edwin as backup as well, it'll be interesting to see when he'll actually play that card.
Yeah, definitely. And we see that Osha choosing not to trade off the Divine Shields, so no sort of cold blood turns are available for Westwith as kind of a punish for that. But it does mean Westwith's going to be able to trade maybe twice with this Argent Squire, because now the Divine Shield's still there. We're probably going to see him want to try and be very efficient with his dagger. How he uses the coin here is really going to impact this matchup, because if we look at Westwith's hand, pretty much all his hand is just combo activator cards, or even cards that require a dagger, like the Thug, like the Deckhand. But obviously just choosing to use it on this turn, get the early tempo. I'm going to try and take early board control and win against the Paladin that way.
That's right, and with Westwith, even though he's got to make sure none of those Sylvan recruits do stay on the board in case level up does appear later on in a few turns, but he's got quite a few answers already to keep up with. Of course, he's got his weapon and he's got the agent to at least take him out and keep him. You know, not make sure Osha doesn't get too overzealous and too much control of the board, which is actually nice to see.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a hard matchup for Rogue, because Rogue has typically struggled to deal with wide boards, and Odd Paladin is the king of making wide boards at the moment. You know, that hero power makes 2 minions. It almost doesn't matter what size those minions are, because there's the threat of them getting buffed. There's the threat of raid leaders and fungalmancers and level up. And we can even see in Osha's hand, he's actually got the Blessed Maul already. So if he can get a board where it seems beneficial enough to him to give all those minions +1 attack, we might see this be quite a blowout for Westwith. And Westwith, notably, not running Fan of Knives, so very difficult for him to come back if Osha's able to get wide board control. That's
a massive talking point as well. Without that AoE, especially against Odd Paladin, it's going to be extremely, extremely difficult. We know how favoured this matchup can be for Osha, but it does depend on how quick he does get these minions on the board. It's all going to be about board control for him, and of course with Westwith, he just needs to do everything in his power to last as long as he can to get some kind of board control later on in the game. But he knows it's going to be an extremely difficult matchup for him.
Yeah, it's always really scary as any class going into the Odd Paladins turn 5, and you're looking at that board thinking, well, I can't clear any of these, and even if there's not many Silverhand recruits, that Fungalmancer is just really scary to play against, to be honest. That's just immediately 4/4 in stats that affect the board that turn, aside from the body it comes with, and that kind of gives Osha the ability to trade up if we want, and we can even see 2 Fungalmancers, so I'd be really surprised if Osha didn't at least cash in on one of these Fungalmancers while it's live now, having the other one in hand already.
Yeah, you kind of need to do it as soon as possible, don't you? I think he knows that the quicker he gets the minions out on the board, the better for him. There's no point holding anything too back, and you can tell straight away it's going to be as aggressive as possible. You can get the Thug down, you can maybe get a couple other minions down, but of course, with the wide board control Osha can get, he can easily end this for the next few turns.
Yeah, Osha's definitely playing this very aggressively, which is kind of what he needs with a board like this. There were no real favourable trades into the Thug for Osha here, so just opting to go face with that damage definitely makes sense. If we look at Westwith's hand, though, he might have the tools to be able to come back on board. I mean, he's got the Thug on board now, which I would imagine he's going to probably trade because he doesn't want to lose too much of his life total here. He's got a Vile Spine in hand and a Fungalmancer. If he ever has 2 minions of his own stick, he can maybe, you know, go for a counter-aggressive push with the Fungalmancer.
Yeah, this is the thing with Vile Spine. It's a good card, but in his turn as a matchup, like if he ever gets level up or has 2 Fungals, which of course Osha does have a second one on him, it won't make too much of a difference. But the fact that he's got some large minions on the board to trade off consistently, it's not in too much of a bad spot for Westwith, but it's going to depend on next few turns, because of course that Holy Wrath's not going to do too much for him.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, plays quite a low curve deck. I think he plays around between 6 and 8 1-drops, so still fairly likely that just is a 5-mana deal 1, draw 1, which obviously is very low tempo. I quite like Osha as a choice here, actually, to not go for the Fungal Mancer on these minions, recognizing that he's going into the turn that Westwith would be able to Vile Spine, and if he got Vile Spined, that would be one of the ways Westwith could come back into the game. So Osha definitely doing a good job here of making sure he's making the highest percentage play to keep Westwith locked out of this game.
Would you save that with the Vile Spine as well? But he's trying to bait him out as much as possible to use it, then use the Fungal afterwards?
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of, this is the turn that Westwith, if he has a 1-drop Vile Spine, this is kind of when he's forced to do it because of how much pressure he's under on the board. So after Osha sees 1 Vile Spine, he can kind of reasonably assume that there's not good, it's unlikely that there's 2, and you can kind of go all in on, you know, a couple of big minions. And if we look at Westwith's health, I mean, he's down to 13 already. He's going to take more damage by trading off with the dagger here. So this is actually just lethal damage with this second Fungal Mancer now.
That's right. He's actually got exactly 10, and of course he's got the Vine Cleaver anyway, but it's not going to make too much difference. He's got the Fungal Mancer anyway. 10 damage straight off the bat, and instantly it's kind of what we expected with Odd Paladin against the Rogue. Osha will take the first game.
Yeah, I mean, it's not all negative for Westwith. If we look at Westwith now, he's definitely the best dressed person both weeks now. I mean, I'm assuming he just probably comes home from work and plays in those clothes, but maybe he dresses up for this, who knows?
Yeah, do you know what, actually? He's actually better dressed than we are so far.
Is.
He's actually embarrassing us and put us to shame. Mate, you've got to stop dressing so well. You know, we're just here casually, but you're just in a shirt and everything. You know, what can we do against that? Nothing.
It's too hot. That's the excuse we're rocking with.
Yeah, that's quite true. Yeah, it's... you know, back in the tops now, because I don't mind being in a shirt and all that jazz, but yeah, winning in this kind of heat, in this kind of heat wave, it's not really my cup of tea to expect. You can agree with that as well, of course.
Obviously Westwith, no issues for him. He's persevering through.
Yeah, he's probably got a full aircon, fan, everything. He's probably like loving life in his room anyway, which I wish I was, but to be fair, I think even my room at home is literally about 45, 50 centigrades, considering how much stuff I've got on anyway.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But we do have the second game anyway. Of course, Osha's Paladin won that anyway. But now, you were speaking before about the Taunt Warrior with Osha, and of course with the Druid. Do you reckon Westwith can make any kind of comeback? Because you know that Mage is not a very popular deck, but we know it can make some kind of damage to it. Yeah,
these are definitely the matchups that Westwith wants that Mage into. We see here he's actually queued it into the Taunt Warrior, which is arguably one of the better matchups in the lineup. I believe it's actually slightly favoured to the Mage here. Maybe not when Westwith has a hand like this. I mean, he really wants to find that 1-drop Murloc into 2-drop Murloc, but maybe you can find it off the top and get there. This is definitely one of the matchups that the Warrior just doesn't have that many answers too early to clear early boards, and the Mage is able to snowball these Murlocs well enough that it just pushes so much damage that even by the time we get to things like Blood Razor and Brawl, that it's just too late for Osha. He'll have taken too much damage.
Yeah, speaking before it needs at least some kind of decent 1-drop. Due to before, that Mulligan was not looking too great, even though those cards would have been okay in a later game. But he's got what he's needed, and at least it's a good start for him, considering he's playing against this Taunt Warrior.
Yeah, so we do see Osha had the slam there, because he was obviously quite scared of the Rockpool Hunter coming down, making that a 2-3. But that's actually only a 1-off in Osha's deck, so that was, you know, a pretty good answer, well, sort of the only answer he had to that. And he managed to get that on, you know, turn 1. And obviously we can see that Westwith didn't have the Murloc Snowball available, but, you know, Osha's playing it safe, as I believe he should in this position.
That's right, and Osha, if we look at his hand now, so of course his Drake is handy, but not till later on in the game, so it's a little bit too pointless, but at least he's got a Tar Creeper just to keep him at bay until the next couple of turns. And of course he's got that Brawl and Execute if things get a little bit out of hand.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we even saw Osha actually threw the quest away in this matchup, sort of recognizing that his win condition isn't to get that quest online and kill Westwith. It's just, you know, survive through the onslaught of Murlocs and kind of exhaust him of resources. We did see that Westwith was forced to play the Book of Spectres last turn, which is really not the turn he was looking for. He would have much rather just developed minions, but instead forced to just do that, actually end up floating 1 mana, which in this kind of deck is awful for you. Never really want to be doing that. And we can see that Osha's just got a really good hand for this kind of matchup. He's got the Blood Razor in hand already. He's got the Brawl. He's even got his 1-off Primordial Drake as well. So if it gets to those later turns, he can have that come down and AoE the board again.
And it was quite funny as well. You were talking about how he was getting rid of his quest, and his quest literally came out the next couple of turns afterwards. But that's an interesting point you make, because some players will maybe find it quite risky to remove the quest, but of course, against a deck like this, you need every card viable to delay Westwith as much as possible. Because as you can see, you know, even though he did have the Murloc War Leader and the Rockpool Hunter as well, he could have used that for next turn with his other 2 Murlocs, but already he's taken that away. So it's going to be looking quite tough for him.
Yeah, I mean, we can see here Westwith might be able to stabilize a couple of Murlocs on the board. He's going to be able to have a 4/4 War Leader, which, you know, maybe it can stick to get this, to let this Megasaur be active. Maybe Osha decided not to swing this weapon and a Fungal Manta would be live. But this is just a really rough start for Westwith and not the explosive start in Murloc Mage he was looking for.
Yeah, even when he changed his mulligan, he still didn't really have anything to play with. Don't get me wrong, he's got his Alunif, but don't really need it until turn 6, of course, to actually get more card draw. But as you can see, Osha is literally not risking anything at the moment. He's going to use his Execute, he's going to get the Tar Creeper down to keep him at bay as much as possible. But the main thing is, he still get his weapon, and at least he's got a brawl to fall back on if things get a little bit out of hand, considering the circumstances Westwith could be in later on in the matchup.
Yeah, so it is worth noting at this point that Osha does actually run 1 Gluttonous Ooze, I believe it is. So if he finds that, he will be able to stop this Aluna. But he kind of has to ask himself, do I even want to stop this Aluna? Maybe I can just go for fatiguing the Mage now as a very valid game plan to win this game. He's got the Brawl if he has a Murloc board that gets quite out of control. He can shrink it down to just hopefully sort of 1 Murloc, or maybe if he has a Taunt on board or something like an Acolyte of Pain, that might be able to, you know, just clear the board entirely. And we can see Westwith here just with a huge variety of options. He's got so many Murlocs in hand now that he just wished he had earlier, opting to actually cash in on this Fungal Manta for 2 minions, which kind of makes sense here. It's going to be really hard for him to... He wants to be able to have the Murlocs on board to land a Megasaur on, and he's maybe thinking he'd be able to set up a double Megasaur next turn if he can keep these 2 Murlocs alive. Obviously, he didn't have the Cold Light Seers until the end of his turn to make this board really sticky. So I quite like this. The Fungal Manta will be hard to use here, so I think that was quite smart.
I think Westwith will know as well is the fact that he hasn't played his first 2 cards since the beginning. So he's going to have a feeling that he will have a Drake or a Brawl to make a comeback from this. But even if he does take out these minions, you've got to remember that, like you mentioned before, he's got a Cold Light Sea, he's still got plenty of Murlocs to at least put back on the board. He can refill the board consistently. And it's like the point you mentioned before, with the fact that with his weapon, he can, of course, keep getting that card draw consistently all the time to make sure that he keeps up with the tempo. And even with an Ooze now, it probably won't be too much hassle for him.
Yeah, well, the only issue with the Alunif is Westwith has put himself on a real clock here, because he does run out of cards pretty quickly with this Alunif. He's going to be hitting fatigue, and then it doesn't matter what his board looks like. If he's just drawn his deck empty and taking sort of, you know, the 4, 5, 6 at the end of a turn, that just means that he dies in fatigue.
That's right, and you can see now he's trying to make sure not only he gets the job done quick, but be as cost-effective as possible. When you've got to remember, Osha, with that Tall Lord as well as the Brawl and the Drake, he's still in a very good spot. And of course, he's had those taunts the last few turns as well, but it's still going to be very difficult. But I think Westwith is just hoping the fact that he does get this game done with the next few turns, or else, like you mentioned before, he will be overdrawing.
Yeah, definitely. So Westwith does have the burn, it's still in his deck as well. There's another Fireball, as well as 1 more Frostbolt. So if he can get some of these Murlocs through, he might just be able to get there over the top with burn, but Osha's hand's looking pretty good to clear this up. There's a Primordial Drake AoE on the board, along with the Blood Razor. It's just a case of how much Osha actually is scared of this board, really, and how much he wants to clean up, because the full clear is available if he wants it.
Yeah, it seems like he is thinking about it, and I wouldn't be surprised if he did put that Drake on the board. At least he'll take out every single minion on the board, and he's still got that Brawl and that Tall Lord. So, like you said before, he is in a fantastic spot, and Westwith, you can see he is laughing now. He's thinking to himself, what more do I need to do to take out this Taunt Warrior? And the question is, well, you're going to have to figure it out for yourself, mate.
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at it, he's thinking, he drew the one-off Slam early, he's drawn the one-off Primordial Drake. It's just not really been the game for Westwith here. And, you know, we can see from his reaction how he feels about that.
Yeah, if it's most other decks, he probably would have a much better chance. But considering now, if we look at Osha's hand, he has got the shield block, so he can not just armor up, but of course, we'll get another card draw. But he will put poison on those Murlocs to at least try and break through this board, which he has done, but it's looking close for him.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Westwith was able to get Poisonous there, and he was able to trade his 2-drop into Osha's 8-drop, and we can kind of see that this doesn't look like, this isn't really a brawlable board for Osha here, but there's a poison minion on the board, so this Tar Lord's really not looking very good. So unfortunately picking up the Warpath there, we might see that come out to clean up that poison Murloc. It also means that Westwith might not be able to push damage through this board, because if you can push damage through this board, there is still 15 burn in the Fireball Frostbolt, and the Frostbolt will be picked up fairly soon with this Alunith.
Yeah, it's looking quite difficult for him, but Westwith, at least he's got 2 fireballs on board, so we've got Memis to favor. At least if he gets some kind of control and get a bit more damage done to Osha, then at least he can clear up from there, but it's looking quite difficult for him. But you do have the Mana Worms as well, but he hasn't got many spells, and he only got the 2 fireballs to help with him in that case.
Yeah, we see now Westwith drawing in sort of the Nightmare Amalgams, which are going to be the stickier Murlocs, but it's going into the turn where Osha's going to be able to play Scourge Lord Garrosh, and that 4-attack weapon that attacks adjacent to minions, that's a great tool for clearing decks out boards like this Murloc Mage.
And I think you brought up a good point before, it's the fact that with that Tar Lord, it's, even though it'll be okay as a standing point for the time being, but how long will it actually last? So it won't last too long, may last maybe for a turn or 2, but at this rate, Westwith could get carried away, but like I mentioned before, he's saving that ball to the absolute last chance, the last time he can actually do it until it's actually worth him and make it as much cost-effective as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And this Mega Sword from Westwith is quite good recognition. As long as he picks the health here, he's kind of realizing that, you know, Garrosh is an option, and now Garrosh will not clear this board, so I'd be surprised if Osha didn't brawl this board. Clearing up either 2 of these minions is pretty good. It removes so much power off the board, especially with the Dry Whisker pickup. A Dry Whisker gains some armor and brawl. Westwith's in fatigue. There's a real clock now. So I think we'll see that come out from Osha this turn, which makes sense because he's just outlasted the clock that Westwith put himself on with the Alunith on turn 6.
Yeah, because I was looking there, there's still that possibility, and I think Westwith noted as well that at least if he kept that minions on the board, he could have had lethal, but he knows now it's going to be extremely difficult for him, and it's just a matter of time, and sadly, he may only have 1 or 2 turns left until we can try and get this win, but it's not looking too likely.
Yeah, we can see there, Westwith taking 2 fatigue there. He's going to draw 3 more cards at the end of this turn, 1 more at the start, so really not got enough time, really. Just going to have to spew all the minions onto this board, hold the burn in his hand, and just say to Osha, if you have any way of clearing any of this, then, you know, that's game over. You win. Actually choosing to cash in on the burn this turn. Obviously wants to buff these Mana Worms, and I think he's Frostbolting the face because he might not know the Scourge Lord Garrosh interaction, or he might just be going for the most damage, but Scourge Lord Garrosh will actually unfreeze Osha, so he can actually then just swing the weapon anyway, and that will be game over for Westwith, I believe.
That's right, yeah. He'll take 12 damage from this next fatigue as well. It's not looking too low. Maybe he wasn't too sure about that. He may be just trying to play anything he possibly can. Like, you've got to get something out of those 2 Mana Worms, and of course he wants to save that Fireball just to bait Osha into maybe holding back, but I think he knows now with that chain gang as well, it's not going to help.
This is actually lethal for Osha. If he plays the Garrosh and unfreezes his face and just swings the weapon at Westwith's face, then and presses end turn, the fatigue damage is going to kill Westwith. So I don't think Osha's actually... I don't think he knows that the hero gets unfrozen when he switches, because otherwise he's just missed lethal here.
Yeah, it seems like he doesn't know, or maybe he just didn't want to take the risk because there's that possibility where if he messes up, then that can of course happen. But if we do have a look here, with the Fireball, it's 6, and then you've got Mana Worm, which is another 4, which is 14, so, and he's got 19 damage, so yeah, that is lethal. Of course, if that Tar Creeper went there.
Yeah, I was looking at that thinking, yeah, if the Tar Creeper wasn't there, but I mean, Osha did just miss lethal there. That's... I'm assuming he just doesn't know that's how the interaction works. So the Frostbolt by Westwith is actually pretty good. Punishing Osha's lack of knowledge of how the Warrior Death Knight works. Unfortunately, not going to be able to get rewarded for it, as we can see.
No.
It's pretty close to checkmate now.
Yeah, it's a shame, really, with that Tar Lord getting in the way. But yeah, are you a little bit surprised that Osha didn't actually know about that? The fact that it unfreezes your hero to at least take advantage of that 4 damage from the weapon and at least get a lethal?
Yeah, I mean, I would kind of have thought that that's kind of common enough knowledge at this point. The Death Knights have been out for quite a while that you would have thought the interactions come up, or you've seen it on Twitter, or, you know, stream highlights or anything like that, but obviously not mattering too much in the end because just playing safe and gaining enough life to where he couldn't die anyway.
Yeah, that was quite worrying because, of course, went for that Tar Lord. He had exact lethal, so there's nothing much more he could have done. But lucky the fact that even though he did make one misplay, one mislethal, he was okay anyway, especially with that Tar Lord coming into things. So I think he did have exactly 19 damage if that wasn't there in the first place.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was quite close to call, but it looks like now only one deck left for Westwith to make any kind of impact. Do you reckon he could in some way?
I mean, Westwith's gone for a target Druid, Malagos Druid strategy. Osha does, I believe, have... It is Token Druid, yeah. So it's looking really rough for Westwith. Rogue against Token Druid in particular is going to be difficult. Mage against Token Druid is pretty difficult as well. So Westwith's going to have to pull a miracle here to get this win now.
Yeah, it's going to be extremely hard for him because we know full well that, especially that first game, was quite rough considering the circumstances. And we know how good Odd Pally is, especially against Odd Rogue, considering the amount of minions you can get on board again and again consistently. And of course, like you mentioned before, without the Fan of Night or any AoE, you know, it's basically, I wouldn't say delay inevitable because that's kind of a bit harsh, but you just couldn't get any board control to at least keep any of the Silver Hands at bay in case he had level up. But of course, he had those 2 Funkles anyway. And in that game too, it was one of those situations where, you know, you have to try and get as minions out as quick as possible, but even without the weapon, I don't think it would have done too much anyway, because again, you would have seen that Osha would have just taken away. But it seems like now with Westwith, he will have to try and do a reverse sweep, something which happened to him thanks to Dan, so Dan will have to watch this. But with Westwith, you have to try and do the exact same, but so I don't know if it's looking likely. We'll have to see going into this game 3.
Yeah, he's queued up his Combo Priest here, which I think is one of the decks Westwith feels most comfortable on. He played it in the qualifiers for this, he's played it in week 1, he's playing it this week. So definitely just a comfort pick for him that he's choosing to stick on. It's usually pretty good at killing Druid. It has a couple of AoEs to kill Token Druid boards that don't have Soul of the Forest on. Notably, he's playing the Dragon version, not the Wild Pyromancer version. So we can see here a Primordial Drake in hand. He does have 2 of those in his list. He has 2 Dustbreakers as well. So potentially, Westwith might be able to AoE boards if Osha decides that he needs to take a risk and just play like a Whispering Woods or something like that.
Speaking of Wild Pyromancer as well, I heard a lot of conversation about it to say, like, is it better with or without? What do you reckon, in your opinion? Do you reckon it's actually better to have the Wild Pyromancer in your deck for this kind of matchup?
Yeah, I think for Combo Priest, I definitely prefer the non-Dragon and just pure Combo Priest variant. The Dragon variants, it's kind of like a more mid-rangey deck where you play things like Twilight Drake and you just try and essentially tempo people out, and then if they ever leave a Twilight Drake, it's always a risk that they're just going to Divine Spirit in a fire and kill you. But, you know, the pure combo deck just cycles cards so much, running, you know, Pyromancers and Circle of Healings, that it just draws so many cards that it just gets there a lot more consistently, I feel.
Well, I noticed straight away, Osha had that Wild Growth now, and of course, you can Nourish next turn as well. So we're in a very healthy spot in terms of not just keeping Westwith back, but in terms of mana, it'll be looking very healthy in terms of what he wants to do in the next couple of turns. But I think he's trying to decide whether he wants to try and maybe get Violet Teacher down early, or if he wants to get the the Wild Growth down and then maybe to Nourish afterwards and keeping that coin.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing here, for me at least, was that Westwith chose to Divine Spirit this minion when it just had 3 health. Now, leaving a 3 health Radiant Elemental against Druids is always risky because often their lists have Wrath. Westwith will know that Osha's list does not have Wrath in it, so it's more playing around like a Spellstone hero power. He knew Wild Growth wasn't there because that would have come down on 2. So it's kind of just hedging his bets. He really wants this minion to stick because Osha, notably, not running Naturalizers. So Westwith obviously just wanting to get the Elixir of Shadows and inner fire this Radiant Elemental and just really go off early.
Yeah, I don't blame him in all fairness. It was quite a hard decision because when you're against a deck like this, you don't know how early they will get these inner fires and everything else to actually try and get Westwith that lethal. But because it's quite a hard decision, like you could easy Wild Growth and then Nourish in like maybe other matchups, but in terms of this matchup, he just doesn't want to try and take any risks. And of course, with 2 Violet Teachers, it's not really too bad in terms of his circumstances in case something happens this turn.
Yeah, definitely. Notably, Osha as well does have 1 Ironwood Golem in his deck. So having drawn one of the Violet Teachers, this was actually a 50-50 on which was pulled. So I think he might actually be a little bit upset that the Violet Teachers hit if an Inner Fire comes down this turn, which it looks like it's going to for Westwith. And he's just going to clean up that Violet Teacher, not let it snowball or board out of control, where things like Savage Roar and Branching Paths can suddenly clean up his minions.
Yeah, it's looking extremely difficult at the moment. He's trying to figure out what else he can do to take the minions out. But I think, in my opinion, Westwith is in a good spot. But now he hasn't got any AoE or anything like that, it's going to be extremely difficult for him. Now he's got another inner fire.
Yeah, and we see Osha just accepting the risk of, if you have Dustbreaker here, then you probably get me, because he's just going all in with the Whispering Woods this turn, instead of playing like a Wild Growth or a Violet Teacher, which would just get traded on board. And we can see here Westwith just going in for damage here, saying, if you have the, you know, a Savage Roar, then yeah, you can Savage Roar and trade all these minions into my board, and that's a risk I'm willing to take.
That's right. It does have a branching anyway, so you can, of course, he can give his minions +1 to, of course, do it twice to get rid of the minions. But, of course, he can give himself armor. I don't think he will do that, but it's still quite a hard decision. Again, he gets another Nourish, but you won't need that till a little bit later on. So just trying to figure out exactly how and why. Maybe he wants to scout his minions straight off the bat, or maybe save it for later.
Yeah, I mean, a board like this against Combo Priest is a little scary. Now, I mean, he knows that one Divine Spirit's been used and one Inner Fire. He's seen no Shadow Visions, though, but he can kind of get a read that Shadow Visions isn't in the hand because of the Radiant Elementals on board. It would have been free. It would have obviously been reduced to 0, so he kind of knows that's not there. So he can kind of narrow down what he actually needs to play around. So I think just cleaning this board up here is pretty good for Osha. He's got enough gas in the hand, as it were, with going Nourish into Wild Growth, into Ultimate Infestation with the Malfurion. So definitely just taking the safest line here.
And I think using that Twilight Acolyte as well, you can probably tell that, I wouldn't say it's showing a little bit of desperation, but it's just trying to show some kind of ball control to bait Osha into anything he can. At least for the 2 Nourishes, he's got some kind of card draw. But of course, he will be going for those Mana Crystals straight away because of the Wild Growth. Yeah, considering the circumstances he's in, which is a good spot. Yeah,
he's going straight into the Ultimate Infestation next turn. Westwith's hand's pretty card dead, so this Twilight Drake doesn't... It's just a 4-3. It's really not... They're not the 4-10 Twilight Drakes we're used to seeing. And we see obviously he's going to go in again on the second minion here with the... making it a 6-6, but that is the second Inner Fire. So Osha knows that these high health minions just aren't that scary anymore.
Yeah, that's, like you said before, it is his last one, so he hasn't got too much to do now. Another Wild Growth comes up, which he won't necessarily need right now, but he needs to make a decision on how he wants to do this. He wants to get the Violet Teacher out to try and get a couple of minions on the board, and of course he will try and get that Infestation to get more card draw overall to see exactly what he can play with on that next turn. But not only that, but just to keep himself alive, ready for what's to come up next.
Yeah, and Osha recognising that Westwith's hand's pretty card dead, so choosing to kill the Cleric over the 4-3 with the Ultimate Infestation, saying, well, you know, you've got 1 card in hand, you're going to draw 1 per turn. I'm happy with that, I'm going to keep it like this. And Westwith looking like he's going to be trading off the 5-3 here, which I think there's definitely merit to going face with this 4-1 here. You'd obviously be weak to a swipe, because you've already got a 6-4 on board and a 4-1, but can you ever really beat swipe here anyway? I mean, you don't really have many minions. I guess he's maybe thinking, I just need to get these to stick and get that repetitive damage in. It's definitely just a rough spot for Westwith here.
Yeah, it's extremely difficult, and Osha's got so many options now. Of course, he's got a couple of taunts to at least keep him alive. I know that Malfurion as well, not only would he get that 5 armor, at least he will get somewhere else going, but as you can see, of course, he will get those taunts up. But later on, it's going to be even harder for Westwith. It's just, do you feel like now that Westwith's kind of just delaying the inevitable of what's going to happen next, or do you feel like Westwith maybe could stand a chance later on in the next couple of turns?
I mean, there's always the chance that Westwith's able to just get it done with sort of, you know, maybe 1 minion a turn. But if we look at Osha's hand, he's just got all the, you know, he's got Savage Roar, he's got Nourish for card draw, he's got another Violet Teacher. It's just really rough for Westwith here. And I mean, even there, having the Spellstone to clean up the 6-4 was just really good for him.
And of course, with Osha's hero power as well, he can stay alive a lot longer than he normally does. And it's just, it's going to be extremely hard for me. We'll try and do all that he can to keep that Drake alive, as well as put another one on the board, but it's not looking too fantastic. You can see now that Westwith is kind of on his last legs, but Osha now is going to try and figure out a way to end things here.
Yeah, I mean, Osha still needs to figure out how scary is this Primordial Drake. Do I need to kind of build a board that's capable of killing it quickly? How long can I leave it on board? So obviously, he can now gain 3 health a turn. That's quite a lot of armor gain that Westwith's just going to struggle to deal with, because it's very unlikely he's going to be pushing more than 1 minion per turn. So Osha's just going to do his thing with a handful of cards, draw more cards, build a board, and then just Savage Roar and clear. And Westwith kind of out of AoEs here, so he just has to hope that Osha can't do too much over these next few turns. But obviously we see the Soul of the Forest board. Westwith gives it a little smirk and knows that the writing's kind of on the wall here.
Yeah, it's looking pretty bleak in the moment, and of course that Twilight Acolyte's not going to have too much difference for him, I'm afraid. He may stay alive a little bit longer, but there's only so much it can do, and of course with that Savage Roar, it's going to really create a massive impact on exactly because of that benching. On top of that, it's going to be looking pretty bleak for Westwith here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is kind of what we expected going into it, but it's been quite well played by Osha generally. I mean, even in the last game where he missed the lethal, I think he just kind of got stuck on the I'm going to play super defensively, let fatigue kill him plan, which is quite easy to get into the mindset of. And, you know, he made a play that was like a 0% chance to lose anyway, because Westwith had drawn his whole deck. It was an open. Essentially, his hand was face up because he knew all the cards remaining. And we can see here Osha's just sort of running through the formalities of finishing this game off.
Yep, he's literally loving life at the moment. You couldn't ask for any more than that so far. And Westwith did do his best. Of course, he did use those inner fires between the start and halfway through that game, but it just wasn't enough. He had some minions to keep on board to at least give Osha some kind of trouble, but luckily Osha did manage to find some of the answers, as you remember from earlier.
Yeah, and we can see here Osha's just going to push very aggressively, push this damage through, and be looking to end the game pretty next turn.
Yeah, and he still had a spare Nourish in hand anyway, so it wasn't really too much of a bother, considering he actually burned one of his infestations.
Yeah, even choosing to trade away the Dustbreaker, thinking this board's just a guaranteed win anyway. But obviously the Primordial Drake pickup here is actually pretty good for Westwith. I don't think it's going to be good enough, just because, like you said before, the Nourish is in hand for any kind of reload that Osha could want. We can see here the Twilight Drake, sorry, the Primordial Drake just gets traded on board. Osha's going to be looking to just rebuild that, which he can if he just goes for the Nourish. He can play out the Arcane Tyrant and the Ironwood Golem.
I like that word, reload. It's definitely, especially for him in this kind of situation, he needed it. And Westwith must be thinking, oh, you know, I thought I had a little bit of a chance, 10 or 20%, but instead it's completely down the pan. And finally, Osha gets that first swipe. But that swipe wasn't really too necessary this game anyway. Maybe in other matchups it would have done, considering like maybe some of the aggro mid-range matchup. But in this kind of situation, he was pretty much fine to play with anyway.
Yeah, so we can see here Westwith going to be going to the 0-2 bracket. So, you know, next set of games, he's gonna be in his tournament life. We can see obviously shaking his hand, the Acolyte, wondering where it was earlier for that card draw. Westwith just not really able to get it done with his combo priest there.
Yeah,